K. Slaughter of Maryland to be Commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission, the nomination of Andrew N. Ferguson of Virginia to be the Commissioner for the Federal Trade Commission, and the nomination of Melissa Holyoke of Utah to be Commissioner of the Federal Trade Commission, and nomination of Mr. Douglas Dezak of Virginia to be a Commissioner of the Federal Consumer Product Safety Commission. So we have a very busy agenda here to ask these individuals about their nominations, their ideas, and how to enforce very important laws in these various oversight agencies for us. We will start with opening statements, and I'm going to let my colleague this morning go to an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to congratulate each of the nominees here today. Congress has charged the Federal Trade Commission and the Consumer Product Safety Commission with important responsibilities. I'm pleased that this committee is working to fill the current vacancies and to bring each agency up to its full capacity. The FTC is tasked with protecting American consumers from unfair or deceptive business practices and unfair methods of competition. I look forward from hearing from Melissa Holyoke, Andrew Ferguson, and Commissioner Rebecca Slaughter about their qualifications and their vision for the FTC, as well as the current challenges that are facing the agency. The CPSC's mandate is to protect consumers from dangerous products. I look forward to hearing from Doug Dezak today on the considerable expertise he will bring to the CPSC to help fulfill its mission. I previously worked at the FTC as the director of the Office of Policy Planning, where I helped develop the long-term strategy and policy goals for the agency. My experience gave me great respect for the talented staff at the FTC, who often find themselves at the intersection of technology, consumer protection, and competition. They have the difficult task of considering how to protect American consumers as markets evolve and new technologies emerge. When I was at the FTC, I witnessed commissioners of diverse views collegially working together to address new challenges while remaining within the agency's statutory powers. That bipartisan camaraderie was a defining characteristic of the FTC for many decades, and one of the reasons why the agency was often successful. But today's FTC is sadly unrecognizable from the FTC that I knew. Over the past 2 years, Chairwoman Lisa Khan has taken the FTC wildly off course and pursued a blatantly partisan agenda far outside the agency's legal authority and mission. In just the last year alone, the FTC has weaponized its enforcement authority against the Biden administration's political opponents by pursuing inappropriate and burdensome demands against Twitter, pursued unlawful efforts to regulate entire swaths of the U.S. economy under an unprecedented competition rulemaking, unlawfully deleted documents, hindering congressional investigations and potential litigation, as well as undermining transparency in government, conspired with EU regulators to impose foreign laws on American tech employees so that they would be less competitive globally, sought unauthorized regulation of artificial intelligence in a manner that infringes on constitutionally protected speech and can be expected to chill entrepreneurship, proposed broad data privacy and security rules without congressional authorization, and has sought to impose expensive and expansive pre-merger notification requirements that would levy a de facto tax on market activity. These are but a few of the FTC's alarming decisions, many of which occurred without input from a single Republican FTC commissioner after the stunning resignation of former Commissioner Christine Wilson. In announcing her departure, Wilson said that she did not want to give Khan's endeavor, quote, any further hint of legitimacy by remaining. I've known Commissioner Wilson for over 20 years. We served together at the FTC. She is a woman of high talent and integrity. I am deeply concerned by Commissioner Wilson's observation about what has become of the FTC. But you do not need to take my word for it or Commissioner Wilson's word for it. The data show that the FTC's staff is depleted and demoralized. According to the most recent OPM Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, less than half of the FTC employees agree that FTC, quote, leaders maintain high standards of honesty and integrity. That depressing statistic reflects a 38-point drop since the start of Chairwoman Khan's term. In just 2 years, she's caused a 38-point drop in her employees' assessment of whether the leaders at the FTC, quote, maintain high standards of honesty and integrity. That should concern every member of this committee on both sides of the aisle. To me, it's not surprising that staff morale has dropped during a time of agency overreach. It's a tangible reminder that the FTC is on the wrong track. We must reverse the damage done to the FTC so that it can fulfill its bipartisan mission within the framework provided by Congress. I look forward to hearing from each of our witnesses here today, learning about their qualifications, and better understanding what they hope to bring to their respective agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cruz. We're joined by two distinguished members, our leader, Republican leader, Senator McConnell, who will introduce Mr. Ferguson in just a minute, and our former colleague, Senator from this committee, Senator Lee, who is going to introduce Ms. Holyoke from Utah. I'm going to put a statement in the record for my support for the renomination of Commissioner Slaughter, unless there is objection. Commissioner Slaughter was sworn in her current term in 2018, and we welcome her back for this nomination. Mr. Ferguson and Ms. Holyoke serve as Solicitor General of the Commonwealth of Virginia and the state of Utah, respectively, and we welcome both of them to the committee, and we'll be asking them about their respective views that they have used in their states and what the mission-critical aspects of the FTC is and what they think it should be for the future. That mission, of course, is to protect consumers from deceptive and unfair and anti-competitive business practices. The FTC's role has never mattered more, and in 2022, American consumers reported losing $8.8 billion to fraud, a 30% increase over 2021, a number likely to increase as bad actors continue to exploit the ability to try to turbocharge fraud. Corporate consolidation, market manipulation has led to increases in pricing, supply chain issues, products ranging from gasoline to prescription drug prices, two issues this committee has dealt with, and companies have continued to collect troves of sensitive data on consumers without their consent. These practices, I believe, need some attention from this committee. Petroleum market transparency continues to be a major drag on family budgets, at least on the West Coast. In my state, my constituents are paying more than $5 a gallon for gasoline right now. We have an isolated market, but still even that doesn't include for $5. Many Washingtonians are shelling out more to fill up their cars than in the past. Last year, the committee received expert testimony highlighting petroleum market anomalies that have likely driven up billions of dollars on the West Coast. The legislation I authored and enacted in 2017 makes oil market manipulation a crime, and I'll look forward to asking our nominees about this. The FTC is investigating fraudulent practices resulting from artificial intelligence, conducting 6B studies to learn more about black box markets like PBMs, and challenging mergers across industries that will result in anti-competitive activities, and exercising rulemaking to examine commercial data and surveillance practices. So I look forward to hearing from the nominees on their commitment to supporting robust enforcement efforts. I hope that Congress can work together to restore the FTC's ability to seek consumer refunds. We must pass a comprehensive privacy law to empower the FTC to safeguard America's privacy and personal information. And I will look forward to our nominee for the Consumer Product Safety Commission, because it is an all too important mission that we need to protect Americans from the risks posed by products that they buy, and the mission is particularly important to protect the most vulnerable among us. So we have a very busy agenda here this morning, and now I'll turn it to my colleague, the Leader McConnell, for his basically statement. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning to make some comments about a couple of outstanding nominees. But first, I'd like to welcome back Doug Ziak back to the Senate, right up until Doug took on his current responsibilities at the Consumer Product Safety Commission. He was a seasoned and familiar Senate legislative expert. He served our late friend and former colleague Mike Enzi with distinction, and I'm confident he will bring the same sense of service to his role as commissioner. I also want to welcome Melissa Holyoke, the first of two nominees to the Federal Trade Commission. In my judgment, Melissa is a standout candidate for her next job for the same reason she excels right now in her service to the people of Utah. A razor-sharp legal mind, probing intellectual curiosity, staggeringly broad professional experience. Melissa is prepared to make immediate contributions as the FTC takes on a host of consequential regulatory questions. Finally, I'm particularly proud to commend to our colleagues the nomination of my friend and former senior advisor, Andrew Ferguson. It's good to see Andrew back in the Senate, and I'm glad to welcome his parents, Roy and Susan Ferguson, who are with us today as well. Andrew served as my chief counsel for just over 2 years and in the Senate for 3 years. But the relatively brief time I had the privilege of drawing on Andrew's intellect and instincts turned out to be one of the most consequential periods of both our careers. As I said, when Andrew left in 2021, the outsized impact he left was a result of the intense and infectious enthusiasm he can't help but bring to everything he does. When Andrew takes on a challenge, he goes all in. For example, he didn't just work his way up to a top-tier law degree. He earned clerkships at each of the nation's 2 highest courts. And he didn't settle for understanding the highest reaches of the federal judiciary from the inside. He lent a big brain to this body and helped us exercise our crucial role in the confirmation process. But the intensity of Andrew's focus and the depth of his principles don't stop there. Covering a massive policy portfolio on my staff meant devouring a tall and rotating stack of library books as he relentlessly sharpened his expertise on a whole laundry list of controversial issues. And several stints in private practice meant hovering up the niche legal expertise that Andrew now deploys with precision as the top legal advocate in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Through it all, Andrew's intense enthusiasm has been his calling card. I've observed before that one of the most familiar sounds in my office was Andrew's voice from multiple rooms away, presenting a spirited argument to his colleagues. Sometimes it was a vehement dissent, sometimes a vigorous concurrence, but every time it was a master class in principled persuasion. Any number of worthy causes would be well served by a zealous advocate like Andrew Ferguson, but a pivotal point for our economy, with open questions about the future of free enterprise, technology, and privacy, the FTC would be especially fortunate to draw on Andrew's extensive experience in antitrust, consumer protection, and appellate litigation, his devotion to our nation's founding principles, and the boundless enthusiasm that continues to drive it all. Thank you.
Leader McConnell, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure it means a lot to all the nominees to have your presence and comments. again, thank you for being here, and we understand you have a busy schedule. So we'll turn now to our former colleague from the committee, Senator Mike Lee.
Thanks so much, Chair Cantwell and Ranking Member Cruz and members of the committee. It's great to be back in this room. Would love to join you again the next time I get the chance. It's my great honor and pleasure today to be here to introduce my friend, Melissa Holyoke, to the Commerce Committee and to offer my full support for her nomination and confirmation to be a commissioner on the Federal Trade Commission. I also want to welcome Melissa's husband, Josh, and their children, Lucy, Jane, Henry, and Margot, who are here to support her today. Fortunately, Margot, their youngest child, has offered to answer any questions that might escape her mom's ability to answer, which I'm sure that won't happen, but Margot's ready just in case. Melissa is from my home state of Utah, and I've known Melissa for about 20 years. I first met her in church and social circles, and more recently, I've worked with her a lot in her current capacity serving my constituents in Utah. Melissa is an exceptionally talented lawyer who's committed to constitutionally limited government, and I want to highlight a few of her accomplishments and her attributes that I think make her an exceptional and really, really unusually well-qualified candidate to be an FTC commissioner. She's been an outstanding Solicitor General in the Utah Attorney General's office since September of 2020. She oversees civil and criminal appeals, constitutional defense, special litigation, and antitrust divisions for the Attorney General's office. During her tenure as Utah's Solicitor General, Melissa has led and authored an amicus brief that 34 other states joined in support of Epic Games' lawsuit against Apple for anti-competitive and antitrust conduct relating to Apple's iOS App Store, which negatively affected millions of American consumers. In a similar stride for fair competition, she assisted the Utah Attorney General in filing a lawsuit joined by 36 attorneys general against Google for its measures to restrict competition in the Google Play Store for Android users. Melissa's a gifted public speaker, and she's given numerous speeches and panel presentations in connection with her role as Solicitor General, many of which are relevant to topics that she may end up covering. She's an entrepreneur, having co-founded the Hamilton Lincoln Law Institute in order to challenge administrative and regulatory actions and abuses of the class action and civil justice system, and challenge restrictions on free speech. Her litigation experience will itself be an invaluable asset at the FTC, which currently lacks commissioners with a similar background. Her ability to assess facts and the law quickly and immediately discern the difference between a kerfuffle and a federal case will prove to be instrumental in her work on the commission. She'll be instrumental to the FTC's responsibility of enforcing consumer protection and antitrust laws, and will draw on her vast breadth of experience when casting her vote on whether or not to pursue a complaint. It's been nearly 6 months since the FTC has had a Republican commissioner. It's my hope that Melissa will help restore the commission to its congressionally imposed limits and improve transparency and accountability. First and foremost, to follow the law, something Melissa is exceptionally good at doing. Melissa's ability to interact with other people, her magnetic personality, her enthusiasm for the law and for getting to the right answer, along with a keen recognition of the fact that the law does provide a right answer most of the time. These are all things that will benefit her and will cause her colleagues on the commission to enjoy working alongside her. Her commitment to public service is truly commendable, and I have every confidence that she'll be a successful commissioner at the FTC. I'm so proud to be here to support her nomination. While I'm here, I'll also note in closing, I'm a big fan of Andrew Ferguson's. I got to know him while he was working for Leader McConnell, and I found his advice, his insight on legal and constitutional matters to be incisive, well-reasoned, and almost always right. Can't think of a time when I disagreed with him and echoed the leader's support for him as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Lee, and again, thanks for joining us this morning. So now we'll make a transition and ask the nominees to come before us and take your seat at the witness table. We'll ask each of you to make a 5-minute statement about your desire for this post, and then following those statements, we will get to questions from members. Even though some of your families have been introduced, you feel free to introduce them again. But again, welcome to everybody that is here this morning. We'll start with you, Ms. Slaughter, and go down the line from there.
Thank you so much, Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of this committee. It is an incredible honor to return to this committee as you consider my nomination as well as those of my fellow nominees. I'd like to begin by acknowledging my family. I'm joined today by my son, Teddy, who's 11, my daughter, Ellie, who is 9, and my daughter, Pippa, who is 5. And I'll note, at my first confirmation hearing, Pippa was only 9 days old, and she is now a proud kindergartner and proud big sister to my youngest child, Harriet, who is 3 and is sitting right, well, no, has already exited the room. She lasted longer than I expected, so I am grateful to them for their patience and for being here. And I'm boundlessly grateful to my husband, Justin, for his partnership, love, and support. I also want to acknowledge my parents who traveled here from New York City, as well as the many staff of the FTC who are here in the room, and many other friends and family online and in person who mean so much to me. And in particular, I want to recognize my colleagues, Commissioner Bedoya and Chair Khan, who are here. When I last sat before you as a nominee, the Senate had been my professional home for a decade. I could not imagine that I could find another job as fulfilling and challenging as the work I was privileged to do for this great body. But the last 5 years I've spent at the FTC have exceeded all my expectations. The FTC is made up of dedicated, brilliant, professional staff who are deeply committed to our mission and from whom I learn every day. The work we do is not easy. Markets are complicated, resources are limited, and we are often forced to make very difficult decisions. But it is incredibly rewarding. We wake up every day dedicated to carrying out Congress's directive to protect consumers and promote competition. And I appreciate that these are more than abstract concepts. At the heart of our work are the real Americans who bear the brunt of unfair and deceptive acts and practices and unfair methods of competition that make it harder to put food on the table, to pay for healthcare, to build a business, and to navigate the digital world. So when we succeed at stopping and deterring illegal conduct, we are taking meaningful steps to helping those Americans participate freely, fully, and fairly in the economy. And that, in turn, makes our market stronger. When honest businesses compete to provide better products and services at better prices, America wins. One of the best parts about working at the FTC is the opportunity to engage with people who have a wide variety of perspectives and expertise, including the staff, academics, advocates, attorneys, economists, and of course, my fellow commissioners. I believe the work of the commission is at its best when it is the product of robust exchange of ideas and viewpoints. So I'm particularly glad to be sitting here today with nominees for the 2 Republican seats on the commission. I have sorely missed my colleagues, former commissioners Noah Phillips and Christine Wilson, and I look forward to the opportunity to get to know and work with Melissa and Andrew. We will not always agree, but I am committed to always engaging with them and seeking out common ground wherever it is available. Thank you again for your consideration, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Slaughter. And again, welcome to your family, and it's great to have your parents here as well. Mr. Ferguson.
Good morning. Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of this committee, I thank you for holding today's hearing and for inviting me to testify. I thank President Biden for nominating me to serve as a commissioner on the FTC. I'm honored to have been chosen for the role. I also thank Leader McConnell for his generous introduction, for recommending me to the president for this post, and for the opportunity to serve in his office for several years. Leader McConnell is one of the most influential legislators in American history, and I will always be grateful for my time working for him. I also thank Senator Lee for his kind words. I really enjoyed working with him in the Senate as well. My parents are in the hearing room today, and other family and friends are watching both here and remotely. I'm deeply grateful to my parents. They both made tremendous personal sacrifices while raising 3 boisterous boys into men and ensuring that we all had access to a Christian education. Whatever good I have to offer the world is because of them. The free enterprise system is perhaps America's greatest contribution to the world. It has lifted countless millions of people out of poverty and has liberated them to pursue the sort of human flourishing to which all members of society are entitled. No economic system has promoted the common good more than free enterprise. But the free enterprise system is not automatically self-defending. Society reaps the benefits of the free enterprise system only if it protects the system from monopolies and fraud. That is the FTC's crucial mission, to protect against unfair methods of competition in our markets and to protect consumers from fraud and other deceptive practices. Without vigorous enforcement of our competition and consumer protection laws, our free enterprise system would cease to be the miraculous engine for mass flourishing that has transformed the world. It would promote the interests of a select few at the expense of the many. I firmly believe in the FTC's mission, and I believe my experience as a litigator and policy advisor will empower me to help lead the agency in the execution of that mission. In private practice, I litigated consumer protection and antitrust investigations before the FTC and the Justice Department. I also litigated antitrust class actions and merger cases, including one of the largest Section 7 cases in history. And then as a Senate staffer, I saw the legislative process up close. I understand the difficult negotiations and careful compromises that go into the creation of our laws. I learned during my work on the CARES Act negotiations that our institutions function best through bipartisan cooperation whenever that is possible. And I know that Congress expects, and our Constitution requires, that executive branch agencies like the FTC will vigorously enforce the laws as Congress has written them, respect the separation of powers, and obey the constraints Congress imposes on their authority. Most recently, I have served for nearly 2 years as the Solicitor General of Virginia, where I have helped lead the Attorney General's efforts to protect the Commonwealth's consumers. I'm counsel of record for Virginia and a coalition of 16 other states led by both Republican and Democratic Attorneys General, alongside the United States in an important Section 2 lawsuit against Google, alleging that Google has monopolized the ad tech markets. I have also filed amicus briefs defending state efforts to regulate TikTok in Ilario and TikTok against Knudsen, and state laws protecting consumers from pharmaceutical companies in re Fosamax. And in addition, I recently filed an amicus brief before the Supreme Court on the Attorney General's behalf, alongside a bipartisan coalition of 42 states and territories to help protect veterans' access to the GI benefits that they've earned. Consumer protection and competition are not partisan issues. Every American has a stake in ensuring that our free enterprise system works for the common good of all. If confirmed, I commit to protecting consumers, enforcing the laws as Congress has written them, and fulfilling the FTC's mandate to ensure that the free enterprise system works for everyone. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Ms. Holyoke, welcome, and welcome to your family.
Thank you. Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and members of the committee, thank you for holding the hearing and for the opportunity to appear before you today. I want to thank President Biden for nominating me to serve as a commissioner on the Federal Trade Commission. I am deeply humbled by this honor. I also want to thank Leader McConnell for recommending me to the president. I would also like to thank Senator Lee for the introduction and kind words. I have been honored to work with him and Utah's federal delegation as Solicitor General for Utah. With me in the hearing room are my husband, Dr. Josh Holyoke, and our children, Lucy, Jane, Henry, and Margot, while my extended family and friends watch remotely. I want to thank my family. None of this would be possible without their love and support, particularly my husband's and my children's. As a working mom of 4, like Commissioner Slaughter, it is not always easy, and I'm so grateful for their patience, sacrifices, and extra help to make our family work. My children also provide me valuable perspective for the work that I would be doing if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed. The committee and the FTC have worked diligently on issues relating to children's privacy and safety online. Parenting can be tough, and parenting children's online activity is particularly challenging, especially when our kids seem to understand the technology better than we do. We must continually strive to protect our children, especially as we encounter new challenges that can come from technological advancements. I believe the FTC is uniquely positioned to apply its statutory tools faithfully to confront these challenges, stop bad actors, and educate parents on how to protect their children. Of course, this is just one example of the many important issues before the FTC. The FTC's mission is to protect the public from deceptive or unfair business practices and from unfair methods of competitions through law enforcement, advocacy, research, and education. And I am committed to protecting Americans from those harms. I would bring to the FTC nearly 20 years of litigation experience, including in consumer protection and antitrust. After graduating law school in 2003, I spent 5 years at the law firm of Melvin & Myers, focusing on commercial and financial services litigation. I later joined the Center for Class Action Fairness and spent 8 years ensuring that consumers were the primary beneficiaries of class action settlements. The center won hundreds of millions of dollars for consumers. For the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of serving as Solicitor General in the Office of the Utah Attorney General. In that capacity, I oversee the criminal appeals, civil appeals, constitutional defense and special litigation, and antitrust and private data privacy divisions. Overseeing the office's antitrust efforts has allowed me to collaborate with FTC staff in reviewing proposed merger transactions, and I've been thoroughly impressed with the commitment and passion of the FTC's experts. As Utah Solicitor General, I've also played a leading role in holding companies accountable when they engage in anti-competitive behavior that harms consumers. For example, I led our office's work in Utah versus Google, an antitrust lawsuit challenging Google's exclusionary conduct relating to the Google Play Store, an app store for Android. We recently announced a settlement with Google in 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. This is a tremendous win for consumers. In addition, I have led 2 amicus briefs filed by 35 states in a lawsuit against Apple, alleging anti-competitive conduct relating to the iOS App Store. I also supervise Utah's participation as a plaintiff in antitrust lawsuits brought by multiple states, including New York versus Meta, Colorado versus Google, and Texas versus Google. The FTC has a consistent history of bipartisan collaboration, which I hope to continue. The issues before the FTC impact Americans' daily lives. At a time when Americans need to stretch their dollar just a bit further, I am inspired and committed to ensuring consumers are not harmed by unfair, deceptive, or anti-competitive conduct. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And last but not least, very important position, Mr. Dizak, thank you for being here. Please introduce anybody you'd like to introduce.
Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, members of the Senate Commerce Committee. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee as a nominee to serve on the Consumer Product Safety Commission. CPSC's mission is critical. The Commission works with Congress, the public, and many stakeholders to protect the public against unreasonable risks of injury associated with consumer products. CPSC's jurisdiction spans thousands of consumer products and affects all of us, but it does its work with just over 500 dedicated career staff who work every day to keep consumers safe. I want to thank President Biden for nominating me. It would be an honor to serve as a CPSC commissioner working to improve consumer safety. I'd also like to thank Leader McConnell for his kind words and for recommending me to the President for this nomination. I want to first thank my mom and dad. My mom, who passed away from dementia in November 2021, was a nurse who worked in various public health settings. She was and will always be my biggest champion. My dad, who lives in Ohio and is unable to join me due to his own health, was a union welder at a local power company. While working a full-time job, he also served part-time as a police officer in my hometown. My parents' commitment to helping others is something that remains with me. Here with me today is my wife, Leanne, who is the most dedicated public servant I know. She served 26 years in federal law enforcement before retiring to care for her mom, who is watching this hearing from home. While some may have made a second career in the private sector or simply enjoyed retirement, she recently returned to federal service, joining the Department of Justice's Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Forces. I do not tell her often enough how proud I am of her work or how grateful I am of her support for mine. I'm also grateful for my family and friends, including the many colleagues with whom I've worked over the years on both sides of the political aisle. These efforts included bipartisan legislation that I worked on with Senator Bayh and his staff to create the Office of Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator, and with Senator Casey and his staff on the successful reauthorization of the Perkins Career Technical Education Act. I would not have had the successes I did without such great colleagues to work with. Since graduating from law school, I have worked as a regulatory attorney, a United States Senate staffer, and for the past 2.5 years as Chief Counsel to CPSC Commissioner Peter Feldman, who I would also like to thank for adding me to his team. My varied professional experiences have taught me valuable lessons about law and public policy from a variety of perspectives. I believe that these experiences would serve me well as a commissioner. I have also been blessed with many mentors. 2 in particular deserve recognition. Senator George Voinovich of my home state of Ohio, whom I served as counsel and then legislative director, and Senator Mike Enzi of Wyoming, who I served as legislative director and then budget committee staff director. Senators Voinovich and Enzi taught me much about public service. More importantly, they taught me about teamwork and serving honorably. Senators Voinovich and Enzi were lost too soon. I miss them both. Should I have the honor of being confirmed, I will do my best to emulate their examples. As I close, I want to thank and recognize, in particular, my CPSC colleagues. Their efforts each day to protect consumers and to achieve the CPSC safety mission are inspiring. If confirmed, I look forward to working with Congress, safety advocates, and all other stakeholders to advance the Commission's safety mission and continue my public service in this new role. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today and for your consideration of my nomination. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dizak, and thank you for, that's a very wonderful statement about both your parents and about your wife. Thank you so much. We'll now go to questions, 5-minute rounds. We've got a lot of members here, so it shows you the importance of these various agencies to the members of the Senate. So hopefully everybody will keep within the 5 minutes. I'm going to go pretty fast because I have lots of questions I want to ask, but I want to start with the 13B authority that is so important to getting consumers refunds. Do you, each of you on the FTC nominations, do you support reestablishing 13B and without limitations, or could you, if you believe in limitations, explain what limitations that you think we need?
Yeah, the 13B authority is critical for our ability to help injured consumers be whole. So I strongly support restoring it.
Mr. Ferguson?
I agree with Commissioner Slaughter. This is a critical, what they thought was the 13B authority was a critical component of the FTC's enforcement toolkit, and I support restoring something that looks very much like it.
And I agree. Before the AMG case, the decade before that, the FTC recovered $10 billion for consumers. It's a very important tool for enforcers.
So, and you believe that it should be similar to what is the authority they had? You wouldn't want to see a standard set so high that the FTC could never get disgorgements for consumers?
That's correct.
I certainly wouldn't want a standard so high it never gets disgorgements, although, of course, the appropriate balance to strike here is Congress's call.
I agree with that, and I know that Congress is working hard with that, and I'm happy to continue that dialogue with you to ensure that that authority is restored.
Well, I would just say that you likely, if you're successful in your nominations, I guarantee you we will be back to this very specific question. And so we're trying to get an intent here. And I think I have it. But look, consumers deserve to get these refunds without great hampering. And I think that's really important. So if anybody has anything else to say on that. Okay. PBMs. You know, I think that in information age where people can use information and data and do all sorts of interesting things that are deleterious. We want to see a strong FTC use their enforcement capabilities on PBMs. Do you support the FTC playing a more aggressive role here?
Yes.
The PBM market is very complicated. I really look forward to the results of the 6B study that the FTC is conducting. And I think it would be very important that whatever the FTC does in this space is A, based on what the 6B study reveals, and B, consistent with its existing authority or whatever additional authority Congress confers.
Do you think that applying the unfair and deceptive practices to PBMs is a key issue for the FTC?
I certainly think that if the 6B study reveals that PBMs are engaged in unfair and deceptive acts or practices, the FTC should act. Healthcare costs have gotten higher and higher and higher over the last 15 years. They're rapidly outstripping inflation. If unfair and deceptive acts on the part of PBMs are contributing to that, I think the FTC should be acting. But I'm really, really interested to see what the 6B study reveals.
Or manipulative practices? I think Senator Grassley and I probably have been working on this issue for a long time, and I think, well, I don't want to speak for Senator Grassley, but we've come to a conclusion on legislation that more specificity, giving the FTC direction, very specific direction on what are considered illegal acts. If you would take for the record, looking at that legislation, and give us feedback if you think that those standards are standards that you think are important to enshrine into law. In the context of, again, the practices themselves, do you think that they are manipulative or unfair or deceptive?
Absolutely. I've looked at the bill. I'm more than happy to continue discussing that with you and your staff,
I will
Madam
ask
Chair.
for the record your thoughts on whether those kinds of things being given to the FTC, do you think that meets that unfair, deceptive, or manipulative? Okay, Ms. Holyoke.
Oh, yes. This is an extremely important issue. Having access to affordable prescription drugs is an important issue for Americans. In the state of Utah, Solicitor General, we have recently sought to intervene in a class action relating to PBMs and these types of practices. I am, like Mr. Ferguson mentioned, I do want to understand these issues better and talk to the experts with respect to that 6B, who are working on that 6B study, to understand these practices and understand if we have the tools now to go after them. I think there are both there could be potential issues on the competition side as well as the consumer protection side, and see what laws we have, and then, if confirmed, continue that dialogue on your legislation.
Thank you. Mr. Zizek, I'm going to send to the record the Consumer Product Safety Act prevents disclosure of certain information to consumers without express permission from the company. I think this is something the Commission has struggled with when you're trying to get important information like on strollers or elevators and things of that nature. Do you support reforming this provision? And so we'll take that for the record. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations to each of the nominees. I have to say at the outset, all four of the nominees before us are qualified for the positions for which you've been nominated. Each of you has impressive professional credentials, and I have to note, Commissioner Slaughter and General Holyoke, your children are absolutely precious and gorgeous. They are 8 of the most fantastic children to have been in this hearing room. And I will say, being married to Heidi Cruz, the mom of 2 girls, I respect both of you and the professional careers you've led while taking on the extraordinary challenging job of being a mom at the same time. That is not easy, and you have a lot to be proud of. I also want to say to General Ferguson and General Holyoke, you are both serving as state solicitors general. I might question your judgment and sanity for choosing to leave one of the best jobs on planet Earth to join the FTC, but nonetheless, congratulations on the nomination, and I look forward to your serving honorably there. Commissioner Slaughter, I want to continue a conversation that you and I had earlier this week, and it's a conversation about what's been happening at the FTC. The FTC, I spent 2 years there. It's an institution I love. It's an institution with incredible men and women who are dedicated career professionals. It is a bipartisan institution. It's an institution that for decades has worked well and built a reputation for ethics and integrity. And as you know, I am deeply concerned that in the last 2 years, that reputation has been damaged profoundly. Now, I would note, these questions really should not be directed at you. Chair Khan, who is sitting in this hearing room today, has not testified before this committee since April 21st, 2021, her confirmation hearing. That's 882 days without a single oversight hearing. So this committee has not had the opportunity to question Chair Khan on what has been a disastrous tenure as chair of the FTC. Since she is not at the witness table right now, although I hope she will be very soon, I'm going to instead ask you about the conduct that has occurred under her watch, but under your watch as well. And I recognize as a commissioner, it's not easy to stand up to the chairman of the committee, particularly a chairman of the same party that appointed you. As you know, in February, former FTC Commissioner Wilson wrote a Wall Street Journal op-ed in which she explained her decision to resign from the FTC. One of the bases of that decision, she criticized your decision and Commissioner Bedoya's decision to heavily redact one of her dissents, which had highlighted the fact that Chairman Khan had ignored the recusal advice of the FTC's designated agency ethics official. Unlike with other information, FTC information that is protected from disclosure by law, here there is no statutory prohibition on Commissioner Wilson revealing the designated agency ethics official's advice in her dissent. Yet the FTC majority, you and Commissioner Bedoya, imposed the redactions involuntarily under the guise of protecting staff deliberations. I have to admit, I've never seen this happen before. I've never seen a dissent forcibly redacted. Now, since those redactions, the original dissent has been made public and is in the public domain. And I want to compare the original dissent to what you voted to release. The original dissent said, and I quote, "Here the FTC ethics staff had strong reservations with Chair Khan, participating in an adjudication in this proceeding where, fairly recently, before joining the commission, she repeatedly called the FTC to block any further acquisition of Facebook. In the view of the FTC ethics staff, these statements would raise a question in the mind of a reasonable person about Chair Khan's impartiality as an adjudicator in the commission's meta within merger review. The FTC ethics staff therefore concluded that a reasonable person would question Chair Khan's impartiality when serving as an adjudicator in meta within." Those are very serious allegations that the career staff advised the chair that it was unethical for her to participate in the proceeding. She disregarded that advice, acted as a deciding vote nonetheless, and then when Commissioner Wilson sought to let the world know about it, you and your colleagues voted to release, on the right is what was released. That entire paragraph was blocked out. Do you believe the information that Commissioner Wilson was focusing on was relevant to the public allegations that the chair was behaving unethically? And if so, do you think the commission operated properly, hiding it from the American people and demanding that it be redacted from the dissent?
Thank you for the question, Senator, and I want to say thank you for your kind words about my family. I'm incredibly proud of them. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. You're right that there is no statute that requires the protection of information prepared by staff for commission deliberations, but there is a commission rule. It was put in place by Chairman Jim Miller in the 1980s, and it says that staff deliberations cannot be made public, or information prepared by staff for commission deliberations cannot be made public. And it has been applied equally to commissioners of both parties. So commissioners decide what to put in their opinions and dissents. I have never chosen to put, I don't believe I've ever chosen to put information that would have to be redacted into opinions I've written, but I know my former colleague, Commissioner Chopra, did sometimes, and his opinions had to be redacted pursuant to commission rules. And I think the rules are there. We should follow them because they're there, but I also think they're there to protect something really important, which is candid advice from our staff. I rely on our staff to tell me what they think. That's valuable when I end up agreeing with them. It's even more valuable if I don't agree with them at the end of the day. And I want them to feel protected, that they can give me that candid advice without being caught in between public debates and debates between commissioners. We are all free to adopt staff opinions as our own, to articulate our reasoning, and that is an important thing for us to do, because I do think we should be publicly accountable for the choices that we make, but I don't think that we should be putting staff in the middle of those debates, and the commission rules prohibit us from doing so.
Well, I would point out that has not been the practice of the FTC in the past, and I'd like to enter into the record two documents, one from 1999, a second from 2007, both of which are FTC public documents released to the public that described the recommendations of a designated agency ethics official, and the FTC has done that in the past, and in this instance, when the allegation is the chair is behaving unethically, I think the commission has an obligation to make those allegations public, and it explains a lot why the staff believes integrity has gone down so severely in the last 2 years. I'd like to enter these in the record.
Without objection. Senator Chester.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank all of you for the jobs you have done and the jobs that hopefully you'll be confirmed to, depending on how this hearing goes. So I just want to ask a really, how many people get robocalls of the folks that are testifying? Do you get every day? Every day? Every day. Well, I'm with you. In fact, I got one yesterday. I got two yesterday, and they go something like this. Hi, I'm Amy, and I'm here to help you with your back taxes. And if you say anything or hit a button, it starts over and says, hi, I'm Amy, and I'm here to help you with your back taxes. This kind of stuff drives me insane. And you guys all know that the FTC is about unfair and deceptive business practices. Oftentimes when I get these calls, they're from a number in my neighborhood, okay? And yet, I go through the whole process, which is a waste of life, and I get done, and they say, well, we're going to take you off the list, and I guarantee you, either later that day or the next day, I get it. We've had many hearings on robocalls in this committee. It's gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better. So for each one of you that are on the FTC docket, could you tell me what the FTC's role is, or what you see the FTC's role is, in Commissioner Slaughter's case, what the FTC has done about it? I'll start with, I'll go from right to left. How's that?
All right. I guess I'm the right?
That's right, my right.
All right. And this is an excellent question. This is the number one complaint that the FTC receives, over 3 million unwanted calls last week. And the FTC has a strong history of this, as we know, the Do Not Call registry, which I think we all loved and
But
applauded.
doesn't work.
When it
doesn't work.
And I think that's the question, is what's happening now. I think since that time, there's been technological advancements. I know the FTC and FCC have been working hard on this, and this is an issue that impacts our state as well, and that we have heard from many complaints on this. And I would, if confirmed, would support continued enforcement on this. And particularly because it's not just telemarketers, like you said, but there's lots of frauds and scams in this.
Bingo.
And they're getting even smarter and more brazen. And this is something that I would, if confirmed, support strong enforcement of.
Mr. Ferguson.
I totally agree with Mrs. Holyoke. I've gotten to the point that if I get a number from my area code I don't recognize, I don't even take the call, because it's almost certainly going to be what you just described, Senator Tester. So, as the scammers get smarter, the FTC needs to do everything it can to keep up. My understanding is the FTC is working extremely hard on this, but, more work will need to be done. And if I'm confirmed, this would be one of my top priorities.
Commissioner.
I agree with all of them. I think the thing that's really important is the Do Not Call list worked fine for legitimate telemarketers. It does not work very well for somebody who's already perpetrating a criminal operation to commit a fraud or a scam and maybe located overseas. This is why I think the focus really needs to be on the pipes. How are the calls getting to us? So we've targeted our enforcement towards VoIP providers recently, who are able to sort of turbocharge the provision of these spoofing, auto-dialing calls. This committee passed important legislation into law a few years ago, the Trace Act, that also helps call authentication. That makes it more important. I will tell you, my own view is we should apply all of our tools, but I think the onus really needs to be on the carriers to stop the illegal traffic over their pipes, and some of that does go beyond what the FTC is able to do, but we should be throwing everything we can at it because it's so annoying to everybody.
Yeah, it's unfair, it's deceptive, it's annoying, they're crooks. I don't know if you guys assess the penalties or the FCC assess the penalties, but I would make sure they don't have a dime left in their bank account.
Can I just respond? I think the penalties under, for us, the telemarketing sales rule, again, can be effective for telemarketers, but the crooks that you're talking about, who are already committing criminal activity,
Yes.
are not particularly caring about a civil penalty, which is why I think we need to make sure that the system is not facilitating the calls, not just that we're thinking penalties can stop the activity.
Well, as I said in my opening, and I've run out of time, otherwise I'd ask 3 more questions. I appreciate your guys' willingness to serve. I think you all have the ability to know what the right thing to do is, and if you do that, you'll be fine. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tester. Under the buzzer, Senator Thune, would you like to go next, or would you like to defer to Senator Fisher?
I'll make this quick. Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome to all of you. Congratulations on your nominations. The FTC has indicated it may regulate emerging technologies like artificial intelligence. And the question I have is, do you believe the FTC has the authority to regulate AI, or should it be left to Congress? Slaughter.
Thank you, Senator. I think a really important thing in the space of AI, as well as any other emerging technology, is that existing law does apply to new technologies. The FTC Act has adapted to new technologies over its 100-plus year history. It may be that new authority is also needed or new laws are needed, and that is entirely up to Congress to debate and decide. So our job is to look at the laws that we have, which, as we've discussed, primarily prohibit unfair and deceptive acts and practices and unfair methods of competition. And some of those may be triggered by some deployments or uses of AI, and we should be thoughtful about applying them. There may be things that Congress deems are problematic that go beyond what the FTC Act covers, and that is up to you to decide whether additional rules are required.
Mr. Ferguson.
I agree with Commissioner Slaughter. The FTC doesn't, regulate specific industries. It enforces rules and laws across all industries. If the conduct that AI facilitates violates those laws or rules, I think that the FTC should act. But insofar as, we're contemplating sort of a grand regulatory framework for AI, I think that that's squarely within the purview of Congress. If we're going to address an emerging technology sort of square on, rather than taking existing rules that apply to everybody, I think that has to be with Congress.
Thank you. Ms. Holyoke.
Thank you, and I agree with Commissioner Slaughter and Mr. Ferguson on all of those points. And I agree that there are quite a bit of concerning things with respect to artificial intelligence in the frauds and scams, like we were just talking about with robocalls. Those are going to be used to become even better phishing emails, even better texts, even more. It's going to be directed at us and look so real that we won't be able to tell what's real and what's not, and it's concerning. And I think we apply the laws that we have, but certainly if I'm confirmed, we'll talk to you about if there are gaps that we think that we need to address.
Well, and let me just say, I have serious concerns about the FTC regulating or making any attempt to regulate AI. There's no doubt that there are breakthroughs in AI that are likely going to have significant implications for society and U.S. global competitiveness, especially as China and the EU move to assert their world leadership in the space. But rather than having the heavy-handed regulations from agencies like the FTC that I think in many cases stifle innovation in this emerging space, I've been working with my colleagues up here on both sides of the aisle to develop a light touch approach that avoids the unnecessary government intervention that so that innovation can continue to flourish. Second question, Senator Schatz and I have introduced the Internet PACT Act, which is bipartisan legislation that would hold big tech accountable by providing much-needed transparency to online consumers, and it's my hope the committee will consider the legislation a future markup. Among other things, the bill would stipulate that Section 230 immunity does not apply to civil enforcement actions brought by the federal government. Would removing Section 230 immunity from enforcement actions brought by the federal government, such as the FTC, be beneficial to consumers, and if so, why?
I'm happy to start. Yeah, I think that would be really important. We frequently find ourselves in investigations where we are stymied by the application of 230 in civil enforcement actions, and I think that it is important where the law has been violated that there not be a get-out-of-jail-free clause just for intermediaries. You know, they would have to have actual liability. I don't think your bill would impose direct liability on them, but it would give us the opportunity, if liability applies, to pursue it without some special immunity, and I think that that would make a big difference.
I don't want to speak for Mrs. Holyoke, but I bet she agrees with me on this. I don't think any state litigator in the country has not had to confront 230 when trying to address the harms that, you know, some social media platforms inflict on the citizens of our states. You know, whatever 230 was originally understood to mean, it has become incredibly broad, and I think cabining its immunity for federal enforcement actions, and, you know, hopefully someone will consider for state enforcement actions as well, which is where a huge bulk of the consumer protection work is done on a daily basis in this country, would be truly, truly meaningful for American consumers.
I agree. I know.
Okay. All right, that's my time expired. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank all of you for your public service already served and for your not just willingness, but your eagerness to step into what by any measure is going to be a very complex and challenging environment. So let me start off with Ms. Holyoke and Mr. Ferguson, the new volunteers. As we discussed with both of you, a strong data privacy legislation would empower consumers, creators, help us grow our modern AI-enabled economy. What role do you think the FTC should play to protect consumers' data?
I guess I'll take a stab at that. As you know, data privacy, it's an issue that's very concerning to many Americans. It touches on so many aspects of our lives. The FTC has had a strong history of investigations and enforcement actions into all types of privacy-related areas, including collection, storage, usage, all those types of things. So I do believe the FTC is well-positioned to take on that type of role. I also know that my fellow Mr.
Ferguson.
Mr. Ferguson, I think, might agree with me on this. I know that Virginia and Utah also have strong data privacy laws. But the commissioners, Commissioner Slaughter, Commissioner Bedoya, and Commissioner Khan, have also spoken about these issues, and that it is probably best for Congress to speak here, to have comprehensive privacy legislation in this space.
Yep, I agree. You know, Virginia passed a data privacy law in 2020, like lots of states are doing. You know, consistent with sort of our federal structure, states are doing all sorts of experimenting on the best approach here. But data privacy sort of uniquely touches on questions of interstate commerce that make it difficult, I think, for the states to address this square on without creating sort of a patchwork system that can be very difficult for regulated entities to comply with. It can be very difficult for consumers to know what their rights are, you know, depending on where violations occur, where the conduct took place. And so, you know, I think sort of consistent with our constitutional design, this is precisely the sort of thing I think that cries out for congressional intervention. I think that the FTC as an agency has some experience in this, and if Congress were looking for an agency to sort of lodge this authority, I think the FTC is a good candidate. But I think the most important thing here is for Congress to take the lead in addressing what is, you know, a brand new market and a brand new market concern that touches the whole country.
Right. Thank you for that. And Ms. Slaughter, I'll let you answer that as well, but then you get your own question as the incumbent, or one of the incumbents. The FTC has established the Office of Technology to assist with investigations and rulemakings to help protect consumers online. How well technology experts within the agency help to enforce the FTC Act? And within that, buried, and you don't have to respond to this, but certainly a concern all of us have is how can we make sure that the FTC continues to have the talent to keep up with these incredibly fast evolutions and innovations in technology. So last part of that question is, are additional authorities and subject matter experts needed to meet the challenges consumers face?
Thank you so much, Senator. First, on data privacy legislation, I have long been and continue to be a strong supporter of Congress passing comprehensive privacy legislation. I think this is a really important area. It's one where lots of people on this committee and in the public and at the agency feel a huge sense of urgency. It is also why, even while I think Congress should move forward, I have supported the FTC really making sure we're doing everything we can with the tools that we have right now. And it's why I supported our ongoing open rulemaking proceeding on commercial surveillance and data security. I want to be really clear because I know a lot of members have expressed concerns about wide-ranging FTC regulation. We can't do by regulation what we could not do in individual enforcement actions. The authority that Congress has given us allows us to promulgate rules in the consumer protection space that address unfair or deceptive acts and practices that are prevalent in the economy. Those are two substantive guideposts. So those are the kinds of things that we could bring individual enforcement actions on. You can do much more with legislation. We are cabined to the FTC Act. You can look at these issues much more broadly. So I think we should be doing that, but it is not nearly as much as you could be doing. On your question about Office of Technology, I was really proud to support its establishment. I'm grateful to Chair Khan for setting it up for exactly the reasons that you articulate. It is critically important that we have the analytical skill sets in-house to understand how markets are developing and moving. Technologists are going to be a huge part of that. Almost every single case we bring implicates technology of some kind. Lawyers have excellent skills, economists have excellent skills, but we are not programmers for the most part. We are not coders, and making sure that we understand what's going on behind the scenes in the companies we investigate is critical to us getting those investigations right and getting the remedies right. So embedding technologists on our case teams, the same way we've embedded economists, I think is going to be a really important way to move forward. And in terms of what more do we need, I would be remiss if I didn't beat the drum that I always beat before this committee, which is in terms of the resources that we have. The FTC does an incredible amount of work with the funding that Congress is generous enough to give us, but hiring the best talent, having them have, giving them a reasonable amount of work that isn't totally overwhelming, given the demands of the market, really requires an ongoing infusion of resources, and I think that remains really important for the Commission.
Well, that's a point well made. And I'm out of time. It seems so unjust. But let me just finish by saying I appreciate all of your nonpartisanship. This is a commission that really should be, as much as possible, bipartisan, nonpartisan, really working together to get some of these basic issues, because I think there is so much we agree to.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the nominees for being here today. I really appreciate your desires to continue with your public service. If confirmed, you will be tasked with vital responsibilities protecting Americans' personal safety. Fulfilling these responsibilities will also allow free enterprise and innovation to thrive, whether it's identifying monopoly misconduct or market-oriented safety solutions. Mr. Ferguson, I wanted to focus on how Congress provides resources and guidance for Commission activities. In our conversation, I really thought your insights on this are really helpful, and I'd like all of our colleagues to hear this. So from your perspective, is there a key policy that lawmakers should be focusing on right now to provide better guidance or authority to the Commission?
Thanks, Senator Fisher. I enjoyed our conversation as well. Like we discussed, and like we just discussed with Senator Hickenlooper, From the perspective of a state law enforcer, I think sort of the critical question for Congress to address is data privacy, largely because in the absence of congressional action on what I think is uniquely an interstate commercial question, the states have had to act. That's good. That's how the Constitution was designed. But as the states act and as they experiment and as they come up with unique solutions, we end up with this patchwork problem, which can be very difficult for regulated entities. It can be very difficult for consumers. I think that of all of the sort of like commercial activity that takes place in the country today, this so clearly falls within the interstate commerce power that the founders gave to Congress, that I think this is precisely the sort of thing that Congress should take the lead on. I agree with Commissioner Slaughter that insofar as these issues touch on the FTC's existing authority, I think it's critically important for the FTC to be doing what it can with the authority that it has. But this issue is new, it's complicated, and it affects people in a way the Commission simply aren't going to be able to grapple with the way that a Senate can with its constituents. And so I think this really, really cries out for congressional leadership in a unique way.
You know, when you're looking at the states that are moving forward in this area, it's fairly new, but there still are a couple that are moving forward. Do you have any that you would hold up? Some of their, I'm going to put you on the spot, some of their practices where they have been this laboratory and they're experimenting basically so we can watch and see what works. So what works?
Well, I'm the principal vindicator of Virginia's laws and of its sovereign interests.
You think they're the best?
So, you know, I certainly am going to say good things about Virginia's law, but I recognize that, you know, balancing these issues, defining the harm that arises in a privacy violation, deciding, you know, where to lodge enforcement authority in Virginia. We've given it to the Attorney General. You know, I think that works very well in Virginia, but there are all sorts of, you know, contrary approaches other states are trying. The experimenting is good. That's part of the constitutional design. It's a feature, not a bug. But, you know, when you wind up with potentially 50 different approaches to a truly interstate commercial question, I think that's exactly when Congress needs to step in.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Holyoke, for many years, the FTC consistently ranked among the very best federal agencies to work at with very high employee morale. But I'm disappointed to see that morale is taking a nosedive. For an agency that must attract talent with technical skills and workplace satisfaction is critical, it doesn't matter how much funding Congress is going to throw at the agency. So if you're confirmed, how do you plan to engage with experienced career staff to advance your goals and also to advance really the missions and responsibility of the Commission?
Oh, thank you for that question. As Solicitor General, I oversee approximately 40 attorneys, but I work with many more in other divisions that I do not oversee on other cases in which I have a leadership role. With all of them, I think it's very important to come in and understand their perspectives, understand their recommendations. And so if confirmed, I would want to, just day one, meet with all of the offices. I want to listen to them, understand what their perspective on these issues, understand their concerns in the best way that I could support them.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Slaughter, I'm concerned that the FTC has lost all capacity for bipartisanship. I really, really appreciate hearing all of you and your comments today. When Commissioner Wilson resigned, she said nice things about you. Very nice thing. She noted that you provided transparency and robust lines of communication with all commissioners, in addition to constructive debate on policy issues, respect for the agency's experienced and knowledgeable staff. Do you think that there is a way forward at this point in time for the Commission to be able to instill these basic principles again?
Absolutely. I think working with people who have different views from you is not only important, it's an incredible opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to build consensus. It's how I felt when I worked in the Senate, and it's one of the great privileges of working at an agency like the FTC. So yes, I believe there is a way forward, and I am fully committed to it.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Klobuchar.
Appreciate that. Mr. Ziak, welcome. I wanted to ask you about a specific program, and that is the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act. I worked on this as a brand new senator when we had a tragic drowning of a little girl, Abigail Taylor, in Minnesota. She actually survived the pool incident, was maimed, and came out of it after 16 surgeries and then died. And it was a malfunctioning situation with the drain. We passed a law. I'm really proud of it. We've gotten the deaths down to practically none as of a few years ago of kids in public pools. It's been a real victory, actually. And I just want to make sure that you will work with us to supporting the CPSC's drowning prevention program.
Senator, I am aware of your longstanding interest in this matter. In fact, we have, as a staffer, worked with Abby's Hope and other pool safety advocates. The seriousness of this issue can't be overstated. Drownings for children between the ages of 1 and 4 is the #1 cause of death, and the #2 cause of death for children between the ages of 5 and 14. So yes, I'm committed to working with you, this committee, and all outside organizations on pool safety issues.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then I'll turn to FTC. I had some really good discussions yesterday with you, Mr. Ferguson, and Ms. Holyoke. Thank you very much. I'm going to start with that. As you know, the merger activity hit record levels in 2021, and we have many issues related to tech. We still haven't passed a tech competition bill since the onset of the internet, even though we've gotten a number of bills through the Judiciary Committee. And there are major suits, as you know, going on at both the Justice Department, Antitrust, and the FTC. Senator Grassley and I passed our Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act, worked with Senator Lee on that. Ms. Holyoke and Mr. Ferguson, do you want to talk about your expectations about the FTC's merger review workload? And maybe, Mr. Ferguson, you want to focus a little on the Google ad tech case and the other bill we passed about not being able to move venues for the tech companies on antitrust cases. That was Senator Lee's bill with me.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I enjoyed our conversation yesterday as well. Like I said in my opening, Virginia is the lead co-plaintiff with the United States in the Section 2 suit alleging the monopolization of the ad tech markets by Google. When we filed our suit, Google, understandably, we filed it in my home courts in the Eastern District of Virginia, and Google tried to transfer that suit up to go alongside a pending MDL in the Southern District of New York. And we filed our suit not terribly long after the Congress had passed and the president had signed the State Antitrust Enforcement Venue Act, the one you referred to. And I argued in that against that transfer motion on the ground that, you know, if the court were to transfer us up to New York, it would kind of be defeating the purpose of this law that Congress had just passed to protect states from having to do MDLs and antitrust enforcement cases. And the district court agreed and kept us in the Eastern District of Virginia, and alongside the United States and our other coalition states, you know, that suit is moving apace, headed toward trial. So, you know, I got to experience on the ground Congress's very good work in this area. On the ad tech case itself, I think it is critically important. I know that Congress is engaged appropriately in a robust debate about whether additional antitrust enforcement tools are necessary to confront the challenge of big tech, which I do think is the competition question for our time. But, you know, I do just at least want to note, I think there is a lot of good work that enforcers can do with the existing laws. Virginia and Utah have both been on the forefront of doing everything that they are able to do with the existing laws. I know that Mrs. Holyoke has done a ton of work on this in the big tech space. Virginia's doing it now as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. I'm just going to give her one chance to answer as well on this question. And I know that I've already talked to Commissioner Slaughter about this, and she does great work. So I'm going to give our new nominee here a chance to pitch in on this.
Absolutely. And thank you, Senator. And I enjoyed our conversation the other day. And I absolutely agree with everything Mr. Ferguson was saying. We are involved in those same cases. And thank you for your work on the Venue Act. That is extremely important. As far as, and I'll just say quickly, the the volume of merger transactions. It is concerning, and we want to make sure that we do it and we do it right. I would like to, if confirmed, talk to the FTC staff and understand the volume and how best to support them to make sure we get it done, that we stay vigilant, particularly in digital markets, as many of the commissioners have talked about.
All right. Thank you, all of you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you to each of you for being with us. We're pleased to move forward with the confirmation hearing. The FTC has not had Republican commissioners for quite a period of time, and Senator Fisher pointed that out. So I want to do a few yes and no questions, and I want an answer from each of you. We will start with Ms. Holyoke, Mr. Ferguson, and then Ms. Slaughter. Data privacy is an area where I've done a good bit of work as we are doing hearings on AI and quantum and looking at renewing the quantum initiative. What we're hearing from witnesses is that we need a federal privacy standard. That means Congress needs to take an action. And we were all a little bit surprised that last November, the FTC moved forward with a rulemaking on commercial surveillance and data security. And the agency has, of course, asked for public input on these roles. So yes or no, does the rulemaking exceed the authority given to the FTC by Congress? Ms. Holyoke, start with you. Yes or no?
Thank you for that question. And it's difficult to know because I haven't looked at
Yes
the
or no?
record. I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, Mr. Ferguson, is the FTC exceeding its authority?
I don't know, Senator. I would have to consider that very carefully.
No. Ms. Slaughter?
No, I do not believe we are.
Well, I think that you are, because we have not given you that authority to move forward with privacy. Okay, second question, yes or no again. Would you support the FTC tabling this rulemaking until Congress provides clear legislative authority and direction to the agency? Again, Ms. Holyoke, starting with you.
Yes, I would support that.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson?
I would as well.
Ms. Slaughter?
No, Senator, we can only in a
No, ma'am,
rule.
yes or no?
No, the
Okay.
answer is no.
AI regulation. I mentioned this earlier. If confirmed, would you support FTC actions related to AI other than those concerning fraud, deception, and competition issues? Those clearly fall under the FTC's jurisdiction. What we're concerned about is restrictions on the ways in which companies handle consumer data or looking at bias in the algorithms used to fuel AI applications. So would you support the FTC going beyond the authorities that they have been given when it comes to AI? Ms. Holyoke?
I would not support going beyond any of the authorities, but I would want to understand all
I'm not
70
hearing you.
statutes.
Not hearing you.
I'm so sorry. No, I would support not going beyond any of the authorities that Congress has been giving
So you're
us.
a no. Okay.
No,
Mr.
I do not
Ferguson?
think the FTC should exceed its statutory authority.
Okay. Ms. Slaughter?
No, I do not think the FTC should exceed its statutory authority.
Okay, thank you. The BOTS Act was passed in 2016. This is something that I introduced. Senator Schumer carried it in the Senate, and it would prohibit scalpers from using bots to circumvent online sales restrictions and automate the purchases of mass amounts of ticket selling. Of course, we had this issue come up with some entertainers earlier this year. We've had a hearing on it. But the FTC has only brought forward one single enforcement action under the BOTS Act, and they've got the authority that is there. So if confirmed, will you commit to enforcing the BOTS Act? Yes or no?
Yes, I would.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Slaughter?
Yes.
Why do you think that the FTC has chosen not to use the authority that is given to them, Ms. Slaughter?
Well, Senator, this is actually a piece of legislation I was privileged to work on with your office when I served for Senator Schumer. I think it's critically important. I think it's important that we bring the cases, which also means finding the cases and working within the existing.
We're going to be looking to you to continue to get those enforcement action done.
I'm enthusiastic about that.
I have a question for you on the 6B authority, but I'm out of time, so I will submit it to you for a written response. Thank you all. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Yep, thank you. Today, big tech collects vast amounts of data on children and teens, building detailed profiles of every user. And they use that personal information as raw material to power algorithms that push toxic content and targeted advertising that harms young people. You just have to look at the results. 1 in 3 high school girls contemplated suicide in 2021. At least 1 in 10 girls attempted suicide that very same year. And amongst LGBTQ youth, the number was more like 1 in 5. That is a staggering number. We must address this mental health crisis. That is why Senator Cassidy and I introduced the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA 2.0, to put parents and young people back in control of their data. Commissioner Slaughter, Ms. Holyoke, and Mr. Ferguson, do you agree that children and teens deserve robust privacy protections? Yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Unequivocally, yes.
Yes.
Thank you. To the same 3 nominees, do you agree that targeted marketing can be inherently manipulative to children and to teens? Yes or no?
I think it can be, yes.
Thank you.
I certainly think it can be manipulative.
I also think it can be manipulative, and I'll point out that the FTC put out a report last week about the ways in which advertising to children can be problematic.
Thank you, and I agree with that report. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission did just release a report stating that children have a difficult time recognizing advertising that is embedded into entertainment content. And finally, if confirmed, will you commit to strictly enforcing COPPA's requirements? Ms. Holyoke.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that because we need to address the mental health crisis immediately. I was proud that in July, the Senate Commerce Committee, thank you, Madam Chair, thank you, Ranking Member Cruz, advanced my bill, Senator Cassidy's bill, with a voice vote without a single objection. And I look forward to advancing that bill on the Senate floor and working with the Commission to ensure children and teens have robust and comprehensive privacy protections online, not just up to age 12, but up to and through age 16, in terms of targeted advertising, in terms of a right for parents and children and teenagers to be able to do something about that targeting. I also want to discuss the hottest topic in Washington, artificial intelligence. We're having an AI moment, but data privacy, protection from biased algorithms, and algorithmic justice are not new topics. We know that biased AI-powered algorithms such as facial recognition systems can discriminate against people of color and other disadvantaged communities right now. Commissioner Slaughter, Ms. Holyoke, and Mr. Ferguson, do you agree that algorithms can disproportionately harm minority communities?
Yes, I believe they can.
Mr. Ferguson.
Yes, under some circumstances, I'm sure that they can.
Ms. Holyoke.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. And I know that, you know, the evidence is out there, as we said earlier with the other report, to document those biases that are built right now into algorithms that lead to real-world harms for minority populations. In February, for example, a pregnant black woman was wrongfully arrested for robbery and carjacking due to a mistaken result from facial recognition technology. As companies adopt complex algorithms to make critical decisions on everything from housing to consumer prices, the Federal Trade Commission must keep a very close eye on this conduct and ensure algorithmic discrimination does not become a feature of our marketplace. I thank all of you for your willingness to serve in these important positions. We're at a critical inflection point technologically in our country's history where all of the issues of harm that are already existent in this era of digital technology are going to be supercharged by additional augmentation that AI is going to make possible, but it will just be in degree, that is the harms, rather than in kind. It'll give people a greater opportunity to be able to discriminate, to be able to harm young people in our society, and I hope that this commission will be able to stand in the forefront of the battle to protect young people and families in our country. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for being here today. One of the issues that have a particular interest to me related to big tech is the relationship between big tech and the federal government in a expansive censorship regime that's been uncovered. I happen to know in the Missouri versus Biden lawsuit. Quite shocking, the coordination, the collusion that took place to censor Americans under the guise of combating misinformation or disinformation. And I hope that as you serve on the FTC, that you'll keep that, and know that you will, the Constitution in mind and protecting people's right to free speech. The temptation for government actors to be the decider on these things is a powerful drug, and I think needs to be combated with restraint. And I hope that you'll keep that in mind. The second issue that very important to me in your role is I'm a dad of 3 kids, 2 teenage daughters. So it's, you know, these issues related to social media are personal, as they are, I know, to you all too. And we have legislation. We're still trying to grapple with this in the committee and on the floor, what that looks like. But the FTC plays a very important role in this. And I know that's sort of front and center. It's been the subject of a few questions already. So as you approach those, I know that you'll weigh all of the various considerations and the authority that you have. Ms. Holyoke, it's good to see you again. In your testimony, you mentioned the importance of protecting our kids online. Could you just touch on, as a commissioner, how you view that role in protecting kids?
Absolutely. As some of the senators mentioned before, there's the COPPA statutes and likely coming COPPA legislation, which I would, if confirmed and enacted, would vigorously enforce. In addition, there's the COPPA rule, and that just recently there's been under review at the FTC, and I do like what the commissioners have said about that in some of the statements. Particularly, I know that Commissioner Bedoya talked about the importance with respect to privacy and education technology. So when kids are all online doing their homework, and they should not have to give up all their data and all their privacy just to do their homework. So I think that's a very, very important issue. But I will continue to work with the FTC, and I would happy to work with all of the committee members in future legislation relating to children's privacy.
Yeah, and I guess changing gears a little bit. Of course, there was, I guess it's 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago now, the West Virginia versus EPA case. Could you just talk about how that changes how you look at FTC action, and if you agree that certainly narrows the scope of what can be done and what's considered, you know, sort of narrowing Chevron?
Oh, certainly, happy to. In the West Virginia versus EPA case, this is the case that involved major questions doctrine. This is a statutory tool of interpretation. So what the court does is they look at the statute and trying to decide, they first identify, is there some sort of impact that has vast economic and significant impact from whatever this agency action is? And then we're looking at the tool, the statutory tool and authorization that is the basis of the action, and whether Congress clearly gave the agency that authority to act. So that is something at the forefront of our minds now, entering into, if I'm confirmed as an agency, understanding the authorization, the authorities that Congress gave us, and making sure we stay in those bounds.
Mr. Ferguson, I don't have a lot of time, but in my previous role, we're also involved in some of these litigation against some of the big tech giants and their monopolistic behaviors. But I do, with the remaining time, I do want to ask your opinion. with the ongoing litigation related to the government's coordination with big tech. Could you talk about how important the right of free speech is, and what role does the FTC have in protecting the freedom of expression?
Yes, Senator Schmidt. Obviously, the right to free speech is the foremost among the rights in the Bill of Rights, and I think it's that way for a reason. And I also think that what your litigation, or the litigation you launched while you were Attorney General, reveals the importance of policing monopolies. It is a lot easier for the government to control the conduct of the individual citizen if it only has to coerce a couple market participants and they can control people downstream. And I think that is why the aggregation of private power is potentially so dangerous, because if the government can coordinate with only a few actors, it is a lot easier to control the rest of us. And I think that the litigation that your state launched revealed how this can potentially work in real time. And I think that is part of why the FTC's mission to protect the economy from monopolies is important, both for the functioning of the economy, but also for the preservation of individual liberty.
Thank you all, and I'll just close with saying, your kids not only look adorable, they're so well behaved. I am very jealous of what we've seen here over the first hour and a half. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and each of the nominees, congratulations on your nomination and your willingness to serve in these very important positions. My first question is going to be to all three of our FTC nominees, and look forward, not just a yes or no answer, you can expand on the answer as well for the question that I'm asking. Every day, thousands of data brokers, they collect, they compile, and then sell consumers' personal information to third parties. And they do so with virtually no oversight from the federal government. Data brokers do this with many different types of personal information, ranging from addresses and phone numbers to income and political preferences, to health information, and even real-time location data. And once it's gathered, the brokers link it to specific users and then sell these data profiles commercially. My bill, the Data Broker List Act, would require data brokers to register with the Federal Trade Commission and then provide information about the ways that they both use and share that very personal information about people. The bill would also require that these brokers implement safeguards to prevent security breaches from occurring, which can be devastating to individuals. So my question for all three of you is, in your view, how would American consumers benefit from increased data broker transparency and a requirement that data brokers implement a comprehensive security program as well? Slaughter, we'll start with you, and then Mr. Ferguson and Ms. Holyoke.
Thank you so much, Senator. I think you've highlighted a really important issue. We think a lot about have people consented or not consented to the sharing of their data, but usually that consent, to the extent that it is even valid consent, happens in the first-party interaction. Data brokers take that data and it goes into this whole opaque ecosystem where people don't really know what's happening to it and couldn't consent or withdraw consent even if they wanted to. And the lack of transparency is just part of the problem there. One of the really important cases that the FTC is in the middle of litigating right now is against a data broker called Kochava. And in that case, the agency, in its complaint, the agency talks about some of the ways this use of data can be incredibly damaging. So I really appreciate the attention to this issue, and I think it is critically important.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson?
I agree with Commissioner Slaughter. The collection, aggregation, and sale of private data basically happens in the background of like ordinary online transactions, and the consumer has almost no idea that it's happening. And even regulators often don't know what's happening once the data is collected and aggregated, where it goes, who does what with it. My first boss in the Senate, Senator Grassley, is very fond of the saying that, sunshine is the best disinfectant. I think that transparency, at the very least, can go a long way to informing consumers about what is happening in the background every time they are engaging in online transactions.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Holyoke?
Thank you, and I agree with Commissioner Slaughter and Mr. Ferguson on these issues, and I think the case that Commissioner Slaughter was talking about highlights some of these issues, particularly this precise geolocation information that would, if most consumers knew was being collected, would not be happy about it. I know a lot of states have reacted to this. Utah has a statute, it's not in effect yet, but does talk about sensitive data, and it would include that kind of information, so that it's very important to provide protections, and I look forward to working with you if confirmed.
Great. Well, I appreciate the support for this concept from all three of you, and we'll work with you if confirmed to make sure it becomes a reality. Transparency is absolutely critical, and consumers have no idea how much information is really out there. And if they did, I think they'd be very frightened about that. My next question is for Mr. Ziak. As a Michigander, it's been a long priority of mine to do all I can in Congress to address PFAS contamination. We know that PFAS exposure can lead to serious health effects, including cancer, low infant birth rate, liver and kidney issues, and reproductive and developmental problems, among many others. In 2021, I worked to help to establish the PFAS Interagency Working Group to improve the coordination between federal agencies to address this contamination. In this Congress, I've introduced bipartisan legislation, the Protecting Consumers from PFAS Act, to add the Consumer Product Safety Commission to the list of federal agencies required to participate on the PFAS Interagency Working Group. Because the CPSC is a federal agency tasked with protecting the public against any injury or harm associated with consumer products such as water-resistant clothing, nonstick cookware, and other products that may contain PFAS chemicals, it only makes sense in my mind that the Commission would have a permanent seat on this working group. And my question for you, sir, is as we seek to bolster the federal government's response to this contamination, can you speak to the importance of having the CPC having a seat on the PFAS Interagency Working Group?
Yes. Senator Peters, I am aware of your record on this issue, as well as the record of others and the concerns about PFAS of members of the Commerce Committee. And I know that you and others have been a leader on the issue. I appreciate the work that you and Senator Lummis, Senator Welsh, and Senator Collins have done on the PFAS legislation that you cited. As a former Senate staffer, I don't want to endorse a particular piece of legislation. That's the purview of the legislative branch. But as you know, the NDAA, the FY21 NDAA, created an all-of-government approach with 19 enumerated entities. Currently, the CPSC is a participant in the PFAS Interagency Working Group. It currently includes agencies such as EPA, Department of Defense, Department of Transportation, among those 19. Sharing important information across government begins with a seat at the table. And that's especially something that is important for a smaller agency like the Consumer Product Safety Commission. This approach will ensure more efficiency and more cross-government reduction in the duplication of efforts. If confirmed, I am committed to continuing to work with this committee, and you, as well as other members of the Commerce Committee, on the PFAS issue and on the specific issue of our seat at the Interagency Working Group.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I know we have several more members to ask questions. I'm going to recognize Senator Vance and give Senator Capito a Distinguished Member Award just for being here at the whole hearing. Right after gavel, though, so some members got in ahead of you, but thank you for your patience this morning. And then I'm going to ask Senator Welsh to take over the hearing after that. So, Senator Vance.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair, and I'll try to be brief here because I do have to run after my 5 minutes are up. But I wanted to direct the first question to Commissioner Slaughter. And one criticism of the FTC during Lena Khan's tenure, a criticism, to be frank, I often disagree with, is that whatever the need for aggressive antitrust enforcement, conservatives should not trust the FTC to enforce antitrust laws without incorporating partisan views about race, gender, and sexual orientation. In other words, there's a fear that antitrust enforcement often overlaps too much with progressive political ideology. You're somewhat vulnerable to that criticism, having said in the past that antitrust should be used to combat systemic racism. So I just wanted to give you a sense to sort of explain your own views. Let me just ask directly, do you think the FTC should be thinking about race, sexual orientation, gender identity when deciding whether to bring an antitrust case?
Thank you, Senator. I enjoyed the opportunity to get to chat with you a little
Likewise.
bit yesterday, and I'm happy to answer the question today. I think it's really important that all Americans deserve the equal protection of the laws that the FTC enforces. We can't change what those laws are. That is for you to do. We have to be squarely within the bounds of the FTC Act and related statutes. But within those boundaries, we have to make important decisions about which cases to bring and what to prioritize. On the consumer protection side of our house, for many, many years, we've had something called the Every Community Initiative, through which we ensure that every community in America gets the protection of the laws that we enforce. And that means people of color, but it also means rural Americans, senior citizens, members of the military, where experience teaches us that if we don't go out proactively to look for those cases, we might unintentionally just bring cases that help the same group of already privileged Americans that don't need our help the most. And so what I have been trying to articulate is a view that we should apply that same principle, that all Americans deserve the equal protection of the laws that we enforce on the competition side of our house. And one of the ways that that matters is, for example, if we just made decisions about which merger to investigate, say which hospital merger to investigate based on where we thought there was likely to be the highest dollar harm or the highest dollar value of the merger, we would probably focus our hospital merger enforcement program on high dollar urban centers where high cost care is being delivered. And that would leave out rural areas where hospital closures can have a cascading effect throughout the community. So I think having transparency into who our work is affecting and how is an important thing for us to do.
Sure. I appreciate the answer there. And just one last question also to Commissioner Slaughter. So I wonder about the intersection and how you think about the intersection between viewpoint discrimination and antitrust enforcement. In particular, one thing that we've heard a fair amount from some of our friends who work in, to be direct, conservative media, is that you sometimes have what look like coordinated advertiser boycotts that seem to be directed specifically at particular organs of the media. And I wonder, when you think about sort of competition and harms to competition, do you think about viewpoint discrimination as the sort of thing that proper competition policy can address?
I'll be honest, it's a really interesting question to which I would like to give a little bit more thought before giving you a thorough answer. I think a couple of flags that jump out to me is when you're talking about viewpoint and expression, you're talking about important issues of speech where the government needs to tread very, very carefully, as Mr. Ferguson articulated. And then I also think about is there an articulable violation of the laws that we enforce, and that has to be the first thing that we start with and think about. But beyond that, I haven't given enough thought to your particular question to answer it more thoroughly.
Okay. We'll follow up then, because I would love to get a response after you've had more time to think about it. I appreciate all of you being here. Appreciate all of you being willing to serve, and I yield the remainder of my time. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. And I have a few questions. First of all, thank you all. Mr. Ferguson, Ms. Holyoke, I enjoyed our conversation. And Commissioner Slaughter, great job you've been doing. I really appreciate it. And Mr. Dresniak, congratulations. This is incredibly important work. I do want to emphasize what my colleague, Senator Fisher, said. We've had just a lot of deadlock on some of our very important commissions. It's incredibly important to try to work together to get to an outcome that's beneficial for the American people. So I just urge all of you to do your best to make that FTC really functional. One of the areas I've always had concern is about healthcare and how expensive it is. And I think the biggest threat to access in healthcare is the expense of healthcare. It's just beyond the ability of individuals to pay, for employers where the premiums keep going up, and for the government, for taxpayers. And one of the recent developments is that private equity is buying up practices or small hospitals or nurse staffing agencies, where once they get a hold of it, in our small hospitals, any hospitals really, have to get traveling nurses. This is just an example. The price explodes, and it really threatens our small community hospitals in particular. I want to ask each of the FTC nominees your thoughts on whether that's an area of inquiry for your commission. I'll start with you, Ms. Holyoke. The the efforts by private equity essentially to buy up medical practices, and what we've seen is that generally results in higher utilization and higher cost, and oftentimes fewer practitioners.
Well, and thank you, Senator, and I really appreciate the question, and I appreciate our conversation we had the other day. I really enjoyed it. I think this is an extremely interesting question. As I had mentioned to you, my husband is a doctor and has been employed in various capacities, and the healthcare industry is a very interesting intersection of those issues. I think the FTC has a very strong history of both competition and consumer protection enforcement actions in the healthcare. And I agree with you, Americans are very concerned about costs and having access to affordable healthcare. Again, this is another issue that I would love to understand, if confirmed, the FTC's experts on this issue. I want to know if they've looked at this, if they've seen this type of interaction that you are describing.
Mr. Ferguson, I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to.
I agree with you on the condition of the market. Healthcare, the price of healthcare has exploded since 2010. It's gone like 7 times the rate of inflation or something outrageous like that. Over the last 20 years, much of the FTC's most successful work has been in this area. Lots of successful cases preventing hospital mergers in local markets that would have created monopolies. I think this is like a core part of the FTC's work. It's one of the most important things that the FCC does. And if I were confirmed, this would be one of my top priorities, is doing whatever we can to promote competition and arrest the rising cost of healthcare.
Thank you. Ms. Slaughter?
Thank you so much, Senator. I agree with my fellow nominees that this is a critically important issue. And I think it's really important to be clear that I don't believe our antitrust laws permit companies to achieve scale through a roll-up strategy of serial acquisitions that they would not be permitted to achieve through a single acquisition. So making sure that we're paying attention not just to each acquisition myopically, but to the broader strategy is what I believe the Clayton Act instructs us to do.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a question for Mr. Dziak. The level of penalties at the CPSA are low, according to Mary Boyle, actually. Do you think that the fines that can be imposed meet the purpose of trying to deter bad conduct, or do these need to be raised?
Senator, the statutory level of the fines was set by Congress in a most recently updated, I believe it was in 2008 in CPSIA. So in terms of what that level is, I would certainly defer to Congress on if that is appropriate. Obviously, the higher...
You don't have an opinion?
I don't. Again, as a former Senate staffer, I would defer to Congress. That's a legislative judgment. But what I would say is the level of, the higher the level of fine...
I'm asking you for a recommendation.
And again, I'm not trying to...
Okay, so you don't have an opinion. Thank you. And I recognize Senator Capito.
Thank you very much. Thank all of you for being here. You have wonderful families, and thanks for their recognition and patience. I'm very pleased to be here. In 2018, I had the honor of introducing former Commissioner Christine Wilson. She's a resident of West Virginia, for her nomination. And both she and former Commissioner Noah Phillips resigned their positions before their 7-year terms were up. In it, she wrote a very well-publicized letter that she felt that the leadership had disregard for the rule of law and due process, and brought some questions about bipartisanship. And you've heard a lot of questions about this, and you all addressed this in your opening statements. Mr. Ferguson said consumer protection and competition are not partisan issues. So for each one of you, just quickly, because I do have another question I want to get to, it's important to me. How are we going to get back to that and not keep generating very partisan 3-2 positions coming out of the commission? And Ms. Holyoke, we'll start with you. Holyoke.
Thank you. Like Mr. Ferguson, I've worked on some antitrust and consumer protection actions within the state of Utah as Solicitor General, and I have found that those actions, those investigations and matters are the most bipartisan. It is where these are issues that affect Americans' everyday lives, and everyone cares about them, and we want to work together on this. I have met just previously. I've had the opportunity to meet with Commissioner Slaughter, with Commissioner Bedoya, and Chair Khan, and I do believe that we will work together, well together. I don't think we'll agree on everything, but I think we will find consensus on many, many issues.
Mr. Ferguson?
Thank you, Senator Capito. We're going to have disagreements, of course. This is how Congress has disagreements, the Supreme Court has disagreements. That's okay. Disagreeing often sharpens and improves outcomes. Justice Scalia and Justice Ginsburg used to say about each other all the time that their dissents made their majorities better. I think that's good. But I think it's important for a bipartisan agency like the FTC that the process is free of gamesmanship and that there's transparency in the process. And I can only speak for myself, but if I were confirmed, I would do everything I could, even in cases where I disagree, for all of us to work together on the process and improve the outcome, whatever that outcome ends up being.
Ms. Slaughter?
Yeah, I agree with both Solicitor General Holyoke and Ferguson, and the only thing I can add to what I think they articulated very well is that I also think personal relationships matter, and making the effort to get to know your colleagues, find common ground with them personally as well as professionally is worthwhile. I was really privileged to get to know Commissioner Wilson during her time here and at the FTC, and I learned a lot from her and really continue to value that relationship. So that's something I really try to invest myself in.
Thank you. Ms. Slaughter, I'm going to address this question to you since you've been on the commission, and you kind of went into the ballpark when you said personal relationships. What is the FTC's policy on workers being in the office physically?
I believe our current policy requires workers to have 2 days, at least 2 days in person per pay period.
So that's 2 days every 2 weeks?
Every 2 weeks.
Do you all set that policy at the commission, or is that set, do you have to okay that policy?
The commission itself doesn't vote on the policy. Those policies are set by the chair's office in coordination with central federal government OPM rules and regulations.
Okay, so we have a commission here who, according to Senator Cruz's letter of June 19, 2023, he cites a study that says that in 2020, 87% of FTC employees believe the agency's leaders maintained high standard of honesty and integrity. Now it's just 44%. So, or 44% have said that they have a high level of respect for senior leaders. That's an erosion of pretty substantial half. It's half of the employees. In my view, this is government-wide, but we're talking FTC right here. You talk about the importance of personal relationships. You talk about mentoring and all the way and the value of the decisions that are rendered by the staff. Yet, you have a commission that only has people coming in 2 days out of every 2 weeks. I understand Zoom and all that. We've all done all that. But that does not replace the inner workings of really developing these good relationships. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think you're pointing to a really important tension that not only the FTC, but the rest of the federal government, and frankly, all of the workplace is grappling with, which is the tension between people's desire for flexibility, not spending hours commuting, and more ability to get their work done with the benefit of in-person engagement. And I know that this is something the private sector is grappling with too. I will tell you, I take the results of the FEV survey extremely seriously, and I've really worked hard to talk to staff and get a sense from them of what do they think is working, not working, where do they see the need for improvement. And I'll be really honest that I have not heard from any of our staff a desire to be required to go into the office more.
Well,
Many of them.
That's pretty, I mean, I could
Sure.
get that one.
But I think what's in 100%, and that's the tension that I talked about a little bit, but I think it's important for us to listen, to not make assumptions about what is driving staff views and to listen to them and understand them. And then I think we need to continue to apply corrective action and in an iterative way to see what's working. But I am really eager for not just us, but the entirety of the workforce to figure out a better way to maintain a sense of community while also maintaining flexibility. And I'll just add that this is something I grapple with every day. I come into the office more frequently than every 2 weeks, but I'll admit that every morning when I'm trying to get up and leave my house, it's hard for me to do that. I'm juggling my children, I'm
Right,
dealing with other
right.
things.
Yeah, it
and then
is.
once I get to the office, I'm really glad to be there with my colleagues. So I experience it personally, and I think about it from a management perspective as well as a personal
Yeah,
one.
these issues are so huge. And the morale of a workplace really has great impacts on not just what kind of decisions you can come to, but how you can get to the transparency and bipartisanship that you all express a great desire for. And so I agree, everybody's grappling with this, but you see news every single day where the private sector is saying, you got to come to work. Thank you. Do you want me to keep talking?
I was lost in juggling the gavel. Senator Capito? Oh, you're done. Sullivan. Senator Sullivan, I saw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the nominees, congratulations. I want to follow up on Senator Blackburn's really good discussion, and I have a bunch of questions. Hopefully you can keep your answers relatively short. Where does the FTC derive its power? Why don't we start with you very quickly there?
From the
Slaughter.
From the statutes that Congress has passed.
Ferguson, Commissioner.
In the first instance, from the Federal Trade Commission Act.
Okay.
I agree with those answers.
And then, Mr. Dias, I'm not talking just FTC, but you as well.
We derive it from the Consumer
Okay,
Product
so
Safety
we
Act.
could get rid of you tomorrow if we voted on it, right? We could limit the number of commissioners. All your power derives from the statutory authority we grant you, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I just want to make that clear. I think we're in an age of remarkable independent agency overreach. Let me give you one example. Actually, let me give you two examples. I had meetings like this with the SEC chairman before he became the SEC chairman. I said, look, I know you're going to be tempted to make your commission all about climate change, but you don't have any authority, statutory. You don't have any expertise. So, Mr. Nominee, will you commit to me to make sure you don't make the SEC all about climate change? No, Senator, I don't plan on doing anything like that. SEC chairman told me that. He lied to me, right? I hope he's watching. He's probably not. So this is the kind of thing that just aggravates us because he doesn't have that authority. I did it with the chairman of the Fed. Same thing, right? A Republican. You don't have the statutory authority. You don't have the expertise to make the Fed all about climate change. But he did, okay? So there's this remarkable period in which independent agencies come to us, oh, we're going to stay with our statutory authority, and then you get confirmed, and holy cow, it's nuts. So when Republican Commissioner Christine Wilson decided to resign as the FTC commissioner back in February, she cited the agency, quote, disregard of congressionally imposed limits on agency jurisdiction, defiance of legal precedent, and abuse of power. So can I get your commitment not only to stay within the bounds of statutory authority, but you guys are all smart lawyers, and as you know, in legal opinions, most good judges always start with a big paragraph on, hey, here's how I derive jurisdiction. Here's how the court derived jurisdiction. They go into detail. So can I get your commitment on every opinion that you issue to begin the opinion with a detailed discussion of your statutory authority? Not, hey, we get this through FTC, organic statute X. I'm talking about down to the details. Can I get your commitment, each one of you? I'll start with you, Ms. Slaughter. Every opinion, give it to us. How do you derive the authority on what you're about to do in detail? Can I get your opinion, commitment to do that?
Yeah, so Senator, I fully agree with you that the only authority we have and can exercise is that which Congress has given us. The FTC's authority, for the record, is relatively broad in its statutory terms. It doesn't, for example, include the word healthcare, but we've talked about the important healthcare work that the agency has done. I'm reluctant to make a commitment on how to craft opinions because sometimes other colleagues are the primary drafters of them, but I will promise to you that I am extremely committed to ensuring that there is clear statutory authority for everything that we do.
Commissioner, Mr. Ferguson?
If you'll indulge me to say, I won't necessarily put it in the opening paragraph in any opinion that I write.
Okay.
If I'm in the majority, I will explain why I think the commission has the statutory authority to proceed. And if I'm in dissent, I will explain why I think they don't have the statutory authority to proceed.
Ms. Holyoke?
And the same
Okay.
answer.
Mr. Dyer, I don't want to leave you out there. You feel a little alone.
I agree with my colleagues.
Questions. Same question, though, for you, right?
I agree with Mr. Ferguson.
We could get rid of you tomorrow if we wanted to. Yes. Couldn't we?
That would be the right of Congress.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I have a quick, very specific Alaska question. In the Kroger-Albertsons grocery store merger was announced in October. I know you can't prejudge FTC reviews, but it's currently undergoing review. The two companies together own 35 grocery stores across Alaska. That's a sizable footprint for us. The news of the merger and recent divestment plan have raised concerns among Alaskans that it could result in store closures and high food prices. Everybody's dealing with high food prices. Our supply chain is especially vulnerable, little redundancies. Alaska imports 95% of its food, almost entirely through the port of Alaska. So as you can understand, Alaskans would be cautious of anything that would drive up prices and exacerbate these issues. If confirmed, will each of you ensure that the FTC review takes into account the concerns that I just mentioned with regard to Alaska and our unique challenges as it relates to that merger? Can I not prejudge, Ms. Slaughter?
Yeah, I can't, even beyond prejudging, I can't comment on any particular potential non-public investigation, but I will tell you that I think the issues you raised are extremely important. People's access to food matters more than almost anything else, so I take it very seriously.
Mr. Ferguson?
I also commit to take your concerns very seriously.
Ms. Holly?
Me as well, yes.
Okay, great. And then my final question, Mr. Chairman, it's not just agency overreach. The FTC, in my view, under the current chairman, has kind of made a name for herself, but not in a good way. It's on overreach, but it's also really importantly, and something this committee takes very seriously, Democrats and Republicans, on ethics. And there was this big discussion of her recusal in a certain case. Later, months later, after she decided not to recuse herself in the Meta case, a memo from the FTC's designated agency ethics official was made public, and it revealed that the FTC ethics official had recommended that the chairman remove herself from the case. So you got the ethics lawyer saying, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, you shouldn't be part of this. She ignored it, tried to bury it. Ms. Slaughter, I think you supported the chairman on this. Can you explain why? I mean, the chairman looks like just blew off the ethics official and said, I don't care, I'm going to do this. And then you supported it. Why did you support that? I mean, we need to have an agency that is above reproach in terms of ethics, and the FTC is not only looking like an overreach factory, but a very ethically challenged group of commissioners, and it's really troubling to me.
Thank you, Senator. I'll point out that I explained in detail my position in a 30-page opinion with Commissioner Bedoya, and I know you don't have the time for that here, so I'll give you the short version.
But you did go against the ethics official's memo that was buried for months during this controversy.
So as I said earlier to Senator Cruz, I think it's important that we not put staff in the middle of commissioner debates. I did say that the chair should not have to...
Wait a minute, we do that all the time in the Senate. I go to Senate ethics on issues all the time. I use them all the time. Any issue, my staff, hey, we're not sure on the ethical issues. I go to Senate ethics and say, hey, give me an opinion. And when they give me an opinion, I abide by it. So that's not putting staff in between. That's getting an ethics opinion, which you got buried and then you didn't abide by. Like, that's unethical actions, isn't it?
So I appreciate it. I appreciate the importance of the views of our ethics official.
But you ignored them?
Well, let me be very clear. There are some parts of the statute and the commission's rule that say that the views of the ethics official are dispositive. If our ethics official says you cannot participate, you cannot participate. Those are cases that mostly involve financial conflicts of interest. The question here in this case was not one involving a financial conflict of interest. It was one alleging that the chair had prejudged the matter at issue.
Well, she
In
had,
those
right? Because she
cases-
had publicly called for a ban on future acquisitions.
Senator, I think you're over time.
No, I'm not, Mr. Chairman. I mean, who's next? It's an important
Cruz?
issue. It's ethics at the FTC. Can ask unanimous consent to be able to finish my questioning? It's a really important line of questioning. I don't think there's anyone after me, is there?
I'm happy to continue to explain this because I think it is an important issue to talk about. So there's a distinction between financial conflicts of interest and the question of prejudgment. And on those questions, the rules and the statute do not say that the views of the ethics official are dispositive. So telling you how I approach these cases, I take the views of our staff extremely seriously. I take them on all the matters, and I take their advice, and then I go back to the text of the statute, I go back to the related rules, and I go back to any related jurisprudence to try to form my own opinion. I think it is not consistent with my oath of office to rubber stamp the opinion of any staff in the agency unless the rules tell me that I have to treat that opinion as dispositive. I think it's my job to formulate my own judgment, and that's what I did in this case, where it was clear to me, based on the precedent and the statute and the commission rules, that the chair, who was appointed largely because of her expertise and views on tech policy issues,
Yeah, no,
and concentration in the
that's
tech.
a stretch, right? That's a stretch. A lot of us didn't even vote for her. Look, bottom line is, I need a commitment from all of you to uphold the highest standards of ethics under the law when you're giving advice on that. Can I get a commitment from each one of you, all four of you, please?
Absolutely.
Unequivocally, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you all. I have one more question that I'll slip in since I'm in this seat. And I'll ask all three of you, you don't have to go on at great length. But obviously, and I think this has been well reported, entrepreneurs are less likely to start a business if they think a market incumbent is too powerful to compete against. And I think we talked about, actually at various times, we've all talked about how important small businesses are, how essential they are to spurring innovation, creating, expanding economy and expanding businesses. So how should the FTC think about promoting competition and support innovation in the technology sector?
Thank you, Senator. I think this is a really important issue. And I think that this is actually one of the reasons there is so much bipartisan consensus on competition issues. I think everybody wants to see a market where the person with the best idea can start a new business and build a better mousetrap and enter and thrive. And incumbents with too much market power can protect themselves from competition, and that is really problematic for the growth of small businesses. So our attention needs to be not just on the ability, on effects of mergers or anti-competitive conduct on prices, but on their effects on innovation and entry and the opportunity to achieve that American dream of starting a business and entering the market and building yourself to success.
I agree, and I enjoyed our talk on this specifically, Senator Hickenlooper, the other day. I think that the biggest obstacle to the success of the free enterprise system are barriers to entry, and I think that there are two big ones that every potential entrepreneur confronts. The first are incumbents, who might have monopoly power, and the other is regulation. And I think that the anti-monopoly impulse is the same as the deregulatory impulse, because both of those things can be huge obstacles to taking a good idea in its incipiency and transforming it into something that improves everybody's life. And so, I think that is the balance is we need to protect markets from monopolies, but not give in to a hyper-regulatory impulse.
I agree with everything that they just said, and I would just add that I think we can get there with robust law enforcement in these against anti-competitive conduct and enforcing the statutes that we have.
Mr. Giesiak, do you have a comment?
I do not. That is outside of the jurisdiction of the CPSC.
It sure is, but I didn't want to deny you that opportunity. Thank you. really appreciate that, and I think it is an opportunity for bipartisanship, as you all three just displayed. Senator Cruz, second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Slaughter, I want to go back to the questions that Senator Capito asked. I think there is a disturbing pattern in the Biden administration of federal employees not showing up for work. And after the pandemic, the Biden administration has decided that federal work doesn't actually entail going to the office, and it is the absenteeism is a massive problem throughout the Biden administration. My staff inquired of the FTC what the data are, and I'll tell you what your staff told us. As of June 30th, 103 staff, approximately 8% of the FTC employees, are working remotely. Now, that on its face doesn't sound horrific. 8% of the staff is teleworking, not going into the office at all. They then continue to say the remaining 92% of the workforce are reporting to the office on a regular recurring basis. Well, regular recurring basis sounds good until they specify, and this is based on the badging. So the badges, when you're coming in and out of the office, there are records. According to the FTC, of the, quote, regularly recurring working staff, 60% of them are showing up to work 1 day a week. Another 20% are showing up to work 2 days a week. And another 20% are showing up to work 3 to 5 days a week. Notice 3 to 5 doesn't specify. So we don't know how many are showing up 5 days a week. I got to tell you, when I was at the FTC in 2001 and 2002 and 2003, to the best of my knowledge, every single employee showed up at the office 5 days a week unless they were sick or on vacation, because it was a job. It was a job for the American people, paid for by the taxpayers. You mentioned the private sector. I don't know a single private sector employer that sits there and allows 80+% of their employees not to show up for work. Do you think it is being faithful to the American people that under your leadership and Chair Khan's leadership, although she has now left, that over 80% of the employees are showing up to work 2 days a week or less?
Senator, I think it's really important to distinguish between working from in the office and the concept of showing up to work.
Do you think it's okay? Do you think it is acceptable to the American people? You know what? If you're a steel worker, if you're a truck driver, if you're a waiter, if you're a waitress, there are a whole ton of jobs. You don't have the chance to sit at home. You don't have the chance to go play golf on Fridays and Mondays when you want to and treat it like a part-time job. Do you think the American people, you are honoring your commitment to the American people by having over 80% of the staff not in the office at least 3 days a week and maybe 4 or more?
If I believed that anyone at the agency was treating their full-time job like a part-time job or going off and playing golf, I would have a huge problem with it. But what I know them to be doing is working.
Do you believe it is okay that over 80% of the staff does not show up physically in the office 3 days a week or more?
I believe that that is 100% consistent with the guidance that we have gotten. It is different.
Guidance from whom?
I believe the Office of Personnel Management, but I want to get back to you about it.
I believe you because it's a problem throughout the Biden administration. The Biden administration has decided federal employees don't need to show up to work, and I'll tell you, the rest of the country shows up to work. So that is distressing. Let's shift to another look, and I think this is endemic of an attitude, which is that this agency is unaccountable. When you and I sat down and talked, I asked you about multiple oversight letters I had sent to the agency that you still had not responded on. Do you have any of those oversight responses here today?
Well, Senator, as you know, I'm not the chair of the agency. The letters are directed at the chair's office, and the chair's office is charged with responding at them. So it is the chair that is being recalcitrant. I believe you there. Let's go back to the chair. We talked about how the chair deliberately disregarded the advice of the designated agency ethics official, and then you and Commissioner Bedoya voted with the chair to forcibly redact Commissioner Wilson's dissent, letting the public know that. Subsequently, during an April hearing before the House Committee on Energy and Commerce, Chair Khan was asked, were there any instances where she had, quote, not followed the designated agency ethics official's advice? Here's what she said, quote, "No, in instances where companies like Facebook or Amazon have petitioned for my recusal, I have consulted with the DAO and have taken actions that are consistent with the legal statements the DAO has made." Was that a truthful and candid response? First of all, I think the chair should be able to speak for herself.
I'd love to, but she hasn't testified in over 800 days here, so you're the only commissioner that we have in front of us.
I also want to be consistent with what I told you before about not wanting to disclose staff guidance myself, but since you referenced that it was already in the public, that memo that is in the public says that the rules do not require the chair's recusal in that case, and I think I understood her to be saying that.
So you believe that was a truthful and candid advice? She's speaking so precisely as a lawyer. She says, "I've not taken. I have consulted with the DAO and have taken actions that are consistent with the legal statements the DAO has made." And legal statements, boy, those words are carrying a lot of work. Because you're right, the DAO didn't say you are legally required, you must recuse. The DAO said, "I recommend that you recuse because it's a serious problem. There's a perception of bias." She ignored that recommendation. We just read through that. And then she goes to Congress under oath and doesn't acknowledge that she took a recommendation from the DAO and ignored it. She just said, "Well, I followed the legal statements." Do you consider that truthful and candid testimony?
Senator, I really don't think it's appropriate for me to opine on it. I will tell you that.
Why not?
Sitting here, because I wasn't in the chair's head.
Well, you voted to censor the evidence that would have shown that was a lie.
I voted consistent with commission rules to
Except
follow
I
the
showed
commission.
you multiple instances where the commission has released that information.
But I wasn't part of those decisions, and my job is to follow the commission rules as I see them.
Let me ask you subsequently. As you know, I, along with Chairman Comer and Chairman Jordan, sent a letter to the FTC investigating many of its abusive actions. The FTC stated in response that per agency practice, it had deleted the email accounts of former employees who had worked on a non-competing agreement rulemaking soon after they left the agency. Now, under federal law, agencies are required to protect federal records, are required to keep them for 7 years. Under 44 U.S. Code Section 3301, the definition of records includes all recorded information, and as NARA says, that includes electronic messages, including email, instant messages, and texts. Why is the FTC purging its emails of all of the emails of employees as soon as they leave? And in particular here, you've got 2 employees that came from left-wing advocacy groups that went and worked at the FTC, and as soon as they leave, you erase all of the records in direct contravention of federal law and acting to shield those records from investigation, from congressional oversight.
Senator, since I got to the FTC, I've worked really hard to understand what the rules around record retention are, because they're different from where I came from in the Senate, where there are not similar rules. And I'll tell you, the rules are actually a little bit hard to understand. The guidance I got from our general counsel's office and the secretary's office from the beginning is that all emails are not federal records. Certain things are federal records that are required to be preserved. Also, we're required to preserve anything that's subject to a FOIA request or a litigation hold. But outside of that, we are not required to preserve things, and in fact are directed to delete more for email data security.
So I will say my time
hygiene
has
purposes.
expired, but I'll point out that that definition is hyper-technical, because I understand it, the FTC operates under the fiction that when an employee is leaving, that employee will print out and save whichever emails are federal records. And so the agency can then just go and delete them all. Now, I don't know anyone who does that, and you don't know anyone who does that. That is designed to prevent litigation from getting access to those emails and prevent congressional oversight. And given the pattern of unethical behavior by the chair of this commission, and then the pattern of the commissioners being willing to cover it up, deleting emails in defiance of congressional oversight is deeply troubling, and it suggests an agency that believes it is not accountable to the American people.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ranking Member Cruz. Again, I appreciate your willingness to do public service. Obviously, these are difficult times, but I think you will bring, you new candidates will bring a fresh body of enthusiasm and energy to the work of the commission, and I look forward to seeing that, the results of your labor. And again, thank you, all of you, for your public service. Before we close the hearing today, I have one more question to ask of all the nominees, And that is, if confirmed, will you pledge to work collaboratively with this committee, provide thorough and timely responses to our requests for information as we put together and address the important policy issues and appear before the committee when requested?
Yes.
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 Thank you for that commitment. Senators will have until close of business Monday, September 25th, to submit questions for the record to the committee. Witnesses will have until close of business on Monday, October 2nd, to respond to those questions. Again, one last time, thank you all for your time today, but for your public service. That concludes today's hearing.